Hello, once again, I'm freaking Ken, and I'm here with this creepypasta, this Shadow.exe creepypasta that I found online, written by Soul Captor back in January of this year. Now, crazy thing is that the story is very weird and very creepy, but not creepy as in scary, but like creepy as in like I said, weird. But that's not the weirdest thing that happened. Well, I'm reading the story and recording it. Weird things started to happen to me, or at least to my phone. So I found the actual photo that was mentioned in the story with the shadow with the blue eyes and everything. And so when I downloaded the photo, I placed it into Filmora like I normally do with all my other projects, and I couldn't get the photo to extend out. It would just be stuck right there. And I would close Filmora out, open it back up, and try to move the photo again, and it still wouldn't move. It would just be stuck like it was looking directly at me. So I'm getting kind of freaked out. So I decided to close the entire thing out. And I mean close the entire program out. I force closed Filmora. And I reopened it, and that seemed to do the trick. I managed to get the shadow picture to actually extend out for 24 minutes because I had a 24-minute audio file from, reading the actual story. But again, weird thing, it only recorded the first 15 minutes. And I'm like, why is it only giving me the first 15 minutes? And mind you, it's only giving me the first 15 minutes after, something terrible has happened, and it just stops right there. And I'm like, this is kind of freaky. So once again, I had to close out Filmora, re-download the audio file, and I had to do this several times. And mind you, this is happening at night, around 11:30 p.m. night. So it's like, dude, this can't be a coincidence. And I thought that maybe my phone was malfunctioning, like it was running out of space, but that wasn't the case because my phone wasn't running out of space. I checked it and it was just fine. But after all that, it finally got everything done, and it finally did what I wanted to do, and I was able to actually make the video. But that's enough prattling on for me. I just want to tell you all that wonderful little story, and without further ado, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy. I'm not trying to sound like a badass, because I'll happily admit that I'm too much of a wimp to play actual horror games. But I didn't play it, and its offshoots because they scared me. I played them because they made me laugh. I love the terrible recolored sprites and grainy jump scare PNGs in the same way I love those MLG Shrek meme videos in middle school. All this is to say that I somewhat regrettably spend time playing games I know are going to suck. That brings me to Shadow.exe. Sometimes my online friends and I exchange crappy or funny horror games we find on the web. One of these friends, a Discord acquaintance, sent me a new EXE game the other day. That game, as you may have guessed, was Shadow.exe. His message was brief, but made the game seem worth playing. Grizzly26 found this corny .exe thing on Game Jolt. Pretty funny, from what I played of it. He sent me the game file with the message. After downloading it and installing it, I checked around for any folders that included. It came with an empty README file and another folder that just said MOI, or MOI. I usually play games completely blind, so I opted to open that folder only after finishing it. The title screen was nothing short of predictable. It was the Sonic 1 logo on a black background with nobody inside the big ring in the middle. No music or sound effects were present either. Spooky. Prepare for another mediocre horror game. I pressed start. I was taken to a character select screen styled after the file select menu from Sonic 3, complete with the music. As per usual, there were 3 characters available. From left to right, they were Charmy Bee, Rouge the Bat, and Silver the Hedgehog. I assumed that I had to start with Charmy, since you usually had to play with the characters in order in these kinds of games. Selecting him, I was taken to the Act intro screen, which read, Tickle Pink, Act 0. Charmy's stage began on a bed of dry, yellow grass and dead trees. Above him was a bright blue sky dotted with drifting clouds and small lines representing wind. There was no music, just the sound of a gentle breeze teasing the delicate tree branches. The graphics were decent for what they were, although they were probably stolen from somewhere else. Experimenting with the controls, I found that he was only able to move left and right and perform a short hop a few inches off the ground. I thought he would be able to fly, given that's the kind of thing that he does. But no. As expected, this was a, quote, game in the only technical way. Holding the right key down, I walked Charmy toward Sword and Doom. As I went, the background grew darker and the sound of wind grew more bombastic with every step. Charmy's sprite began to shake, as if he was shivering in the cold. Continuing on, the front facade of a house came into view. It was surprisingly normal looking, just an average home you'd find in a post-war suburb. Upon reaching the front steps, Charmy automatically ascended to the door, signaling the start of a cutscene. He knocked on the door, hesitantly, to no response. As he raised his fist to try again, it suddenly swung open and whacked him in the face. He tumbled down the stairs and fell into a heap on the grass. Shakily picking himself up, he burst into tears. A deep, throaty laugh emanated through my speakers, one that I had never heard before. I was fully expecting the Shadow.exe, or Kefka if you prefer, laugh to show up at some point, but it seemed like the game was going to use some original audio. The laughter looped for a little bit and then cut out. I had control of Charmy again and moved him to the open entrance. The inside of the house was just as standard as the outside. The living room was bland and beige, the lamps and old furniture serving as background details. I wasn't allowed to leave the area, so I just paced back and forth and waited. The song was some kind of music box tune, like something you play in a nursery rhyme, but underneath the chimes I could hear something. It was a voice. Not unlike the laugh from earlier, I could just barely make out some of the phrases. Baby wants his bottle. Very bad boy. Nap time. I had to admit that I was getting a little weirded out. I guess that was the intended effect, but still. I continued to walk Charmy around the room until the game took control again. He moved to the middle of the screen and stared straight at me. The music and voices stopped in an instant, and the only thing I could do was stare at him. The floor Charmy stood on began to creak and groan, the floorboards separating to create a wide hole. Unable to move, I watched as the young bee fell through it and down into the pitch-black basement. He stood unharmed in the center of the darkness, still non-movable. Suddenly, a lone light flickered to life above him, illuminating the entire screen. Charmy was situated between two glass tanks of pink acid, not unlike the water from chemical plants. Hanging above them on ropes were Espio the chameleon and Vector the crocodile on the left and right sides of the room, respectively. They were both wearing Halloween masks, although of whom I couldn't tell. Espio looked like a middle-aged woman and Vector's looked like a middle-aged man. Before I could figure out what the hell this all meant, a figure appeared beside Charmy. It was a silhouette of a hedgehog from the games. To say it appeared beside Charmy wouldn't be entirely accurate, because it looked like more it was projected on the wall behind him. A shadow, if you will. I assumed this was the long-awaited debut of the titular demonic murderer, although he certainly didn't look like the Shadow from the games. As quickly as he appeared, he faded away with a short laugh. After a couple of seconds, a single word popped up at the top of the screen, written in big block letters. Choose. The sonic drowning music started playing as SBO Infector began lowering into the acid. 2 buttons appeared next to me, one colored purple and one colored green. I guess that I was only able to press one of them, so I randomly picked green. I expected to say Vector, but nothing happened. A countdown timer appeared in the middle of the screen, starting at 10. I continued to jump on the button, to no avail. It was only being pressed about halfway, and Charmy was clearly too light to push it all the way down. Defeated, I let the timer go down to 0. The music cut out and the rope snapped, sending both chaotic members falling into the acid. They writhed about as their skin peeled and sizzled in the chemicals. A new message popped up at the top. Useless boy. As the skeletons of SBO and Vector sunk into the bottom of the tank, Shadow.exe appeared above the first victim. He looked a lot more three-dimensional, for lack of a better term. While still a silhouette, he was now on the same plane as Charmy, no longer a background element. Raising his ghostly hands to the sky, he summoned a pink acid droplet out of thin air. It fell directly onto the young bee's head, vaporizing his flesh and leaving nothing but bone. The sound of a crying baby was the only audio that accompanied this. After cutting to black, the game brought me back to the character select screen, just like in the original creepypasta. The file featured an image of the deceased victim. It didn't look like any Charmy though. It was a low-quality picture of a baby with a pacifier in its mouth, tinted pink. It was cast in shadow, making its expression difficult to read. The background was made black, and the music sounded like someone running up and down a flight of stairs. I had to admit this was certainly an interesting EXE game, if a little bit odd. Predictably, Rouge was the next character unlocked. I selected her, taking me to the next level. This time, the stage intro card read, Insecurity, Act 1. Rouge stared in a dimly lit hall of mirrors. Again, the sprites were well made, although probably not original. The soundtrack here was a single note played over and over again, gradually increasing in speed. As I moved forward, I could see Rouge's reflection in the mirror shifted as she passed each one. She went from short to tall, thin to fat, beautiful to ugly. She was visibly upset as she passed each mirror, eventually just closing her eyes to spare herself the sight. The same laughter from the last stage looped as she got further and further right, culminating in a delighted roar that was so loud that it made me turn the volume down. The last mirror showed Rouge in a baggy hoodie and sweatpants, obscuring her entire figure from the neck down. She opened her eyes, lowered her head, and moved to the next screen. The next area appeared to be some kind of nightclub, complete with a thumping EDM track. Weird choice, but okay. It was a bit hard to discern what was going on in the background because a bevy of smoke machines and strobe lights obscured all the detail. Rouge moved much more sluggishly, like she was fighting against the controls. All I could do was hold forward and wait. Eventually, and I do mean eventually, she got to the other side of the screen. At first, nothing happened. I was about to turn around and go back when, out of the blue, a gloved hand reached out from the right side of the screen and jabbed some kind of needle into Rouge's arm. She staggered back and fell to the floor, sputtering and coughing violently. The music became an ear-piercing wail that oscillated in pitch. The background began to flicker rapidly, slowly fading back to the mirror room. With one last heave, she spewed some dark yellow bile onto the floor. The screen briefly cut to black before flickering to life again. This time, with a change, the letters W-H-O-R-E were written in red on each of the 5 mirrors in the background. The game kicked me back to the character select screen, with a lock icon appearing in place of Rouge's file. Just like Charmy, the screen above the save file was now filled with a post-mortem image of her face. At least, I think that's what it was. Honestly, it looked more like a Halloween mask, her visage shrouded in shadow. The only discernible details were the bridge of her nose and her left eye. The background was still black, but this time there was pure silence in the audio department with that. The only level left to play was Silver's. Tempest Fugit, Act 999. Silver stood in some kind of clock tower, gears whirring and grinding in the background. The music was a soft funeral dirge interspread with tickling noises. It actually sounded like it was original to the game because it was composed using cheap Midas and instead of real instruments. To my surprise, Silver could do something the others two couldn't. He could use his psychokinesis powers, as indicated by a bluish glow surrounding his sprite. All that seemed to happen when I used it, however, was him making a grabbing gesture with his hand. As I continued past the rusty clockwork, I could see Shadow.exe hiding behind the background gears. This time, he had white gloves and was glowing blue dots for eyes, looking far more similar to his inspiration than before. After a short walk, I made it to the next room. I was on a patch of grass outside the tower, standing below a few platforms with wooden boxes on them. I figured that this was the time to use psychokinesis, and I was right. The game turned into sort of a puzzle platformer as I used my PK to push the boxes into holes scattered throughout the level. Each was marked with the numbers 1 through 5, and I had to match the right box to the right numbered hole, denoted by gray blocks with the corresponding digits. Honestly, I was just glad to have some genuine gameplay in an EXE game. As the last box fell into place, Silver automatically walked to the center of the stage. The ground began to rumble violently as a dark figure emerged from the inky night. Shadow.exe was fully revealed, appearing as one would expect him to. Shadow with black eyes and blue pupils. I was a little underwhelmed, to be honest. As he raised his fists in the air, bodies started to rise from the holes. They were decayed, with flesh barely clinging to their brittle bones, but they were still recognizable. Espio, Vector, Charmy, and Rouge were lifted like marionettes and dropped into solid ground with a sickening thud. I realized then that the things I pushed around weren't boxes, they were coffins. The victims rose to their feet, puppeteered by Shadow. I could finally move again and move Silver forward as fast as I could. The others gave slow but persistent chase as I passed the gray blocks, tombstones I presumed, from earlier, which now read things like R.I.P. Rose and R.I.P. Charlie. I wasn't able to catch what the others said in the heat of the moment. Finally, I arrived at the rightmost grave, the only one that had not yet been disturbed. The headstone said nothing. The music faded out as Silver knelt next to the hole, panting heavily. While it seemed like a safe spot, I noticed something concerning about Silver's sprite. As the seconds passed by, dark rings started to form around his eyes. His skin got saggier, his features became slimmer and more gaunt, and his breathing slowed significantly. He was aging before my eyes, with some impressively done sprite work to sell the effect. As he wasted to nothing but skin and bone, the classic "time over" message appeared, jingle included. Shadow popped up behind him, wearing a sinister grin. Silver turned to face him, scared out of his wits, backed up to get away. Unfortunately for him, that meant falling backward into the open grave. He landed with a disgusting squelch, and a new epitaph was etched on the tombstone. R.I.P. Stephen. Who the hell is Stephen? With a burst of static, I was sent back to the character select. Silver had no new photo, just a question mark in its place. Lazy. Another bit of static, and the screen went black. I knew the formula all too well, though. There had to be a final jump scare. Just had to be. Sure enough, two icy blue eyes peered out from the darkness. Red text appeared at the bottom of the screen. Know what happens when you don't feed your hedgehog? The full image of Shadow emerged, looking similar to the classic I Am God picture. Wide grin, soulless eyes, realistic rendering, the works, more text appeared. First he starves, then he dies, and finally, suddenly his eyes started bulging and pulsating rapidly. He rots. Both pupils exploded into a mass of maggots and green pus. Shadow's eyes were completely filled with grotesque-looking worms that crawled in and out of his sockets. Some were even caught in his teeth. The sight was grossing me the hell out more than scaring me, so I tried hitting the escape key. That only brought up a notepad message that said, "You don't want me to rot, do you, Steven?" The worms had almost covered the whole screen when the game fully turned itself off. While it was certainly a notch above the other games of its type, it still wouldn't disturb me that much if it wasn't for the ending. Still, something about the game felt very targeted. Who was Steven? An in-joke, maybe? It was weird that the programmer didn't decide to do the thing where the player's computer username is put in the game for that extra scare factor. I guess this was made for Steven specifically. I was about to shut off the computer when a new notepad window opened up in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. It said this: "To my favorite loose end." I should know before beginning that it is not joy or passion that possessed me to write this. It was submission to the insatiable itch of hatred. Whatever becomes of this text is of no importance to me. Toss it, trash it, lock it away, and swallow the key. It truly has no bearing on my conscience. That being said, it brings me nothing but glee to talk to you again. I know you miss Charlie, Rose, and all the others terribly. We haven't seen each other since you were but a small boy. I had to hide away for a long time, so you and that harlot of a sister managed to evade me for years. I caught up with her last year. You heard, didn't you, that there was no foul play? I want you to know it was me. You were always my favorite, though. I still remember that little Sonic shirt you wore when we played those games together. That's why I made this, a showcase of your past, present, and future. I follow, silent but ever present, a shadow. As of this writing, I have yet to find you, but I'm sure we'll meet again soon. Once you've played this, I'll know everything. Love, hate, Uncle Teddy. I had this sinking, visceral fear that I had discovered something terrible. I looked up stories involving the murder or disappearance of people named Charlie, Rose, or Steven, and got a few articles as a result. Back in 2005, a married couple, Vincent and Eleanor Hansen, went missing from their home along with their 1-year-old son, Charlie. The lead suspect was a family friend, Theodore Smith. He too disappeared, and the case was never solved. The Hansons' other kids, 10-year-old Rose and 8-year-old Steven, were at school the day their parents disappeared. I vaguely remember hearing about this case in a true crime context years back, but I don't tend to engage with that kind of stuff often. Now that I had a surname, I was able to look up what happened to Rose. Nearly 20 years after the first incident, she was found dead from a heroin overdose. She was living on the streets as a prostitute and was not immediately able to be identified. What happened in 2005 was simply a footnote in the few articles about her death. As mentioned in the note, no foul play was suspected. Bullshit, as I had discovered. Before reporting the game to the cops, I ventured into the one folder I hadn't seen yet, Moy. It was just one picture depicting a deranged-looking man smiling at the camera. It wasn't hard to guess who that was. When I turned on my phone, prepared to call the authorities, I noticed that I had received a new Discord message. In all the drama, I had forgotten who gave me the game in the first place. The conversation went as follows. I'm Freezerburn, Grizzly26. Sorry, I think I sent you the wrong file. I was talking about a different Shadow.exe. Don't play the one I gave you. He included a link to a game joke page featuring a different Shadow.exe. Freezerburn. Too late. Where the hell did you find it? Grizzly26. Found it on the internet. Can't remember where. Freezerburn. Really? Because I can't find it anywhere on Google. It seems like it was made for a single person. Does the name Steven ring a bell? There was a long pause in the chats after this. Grizzly26 finally responds. It's okay, Kevin. We can talk about this in person. I don't live too far. Kevin, my name. How the fuck did he know my name? Did he have my exact location too? The only way he could know is if I dashed to my computer, ran my virus scanner, and my worst fears were confirmed. Spyware. The whole thing was a trap. If he somehow found Steven's social media and sent it to him, he would acquire the information he needed to find him. But why the game? To distract him? To mock him? Maybe he just couldn't resist playing one last game with his old Sonic buddy. I don't know. The police were called and confiscated my computer and phone to examine the evidence. They took my personal safety concerns very seriously, and I feel confident in their ability to protect me if danger should arise. I hope Theodore's flair for the dramatic ends up biting him in the ass, but I'm not betting on it. Evil has a way of slipping through the cracks. Steven Hansen, wherever you are, stay safe. Update. I found a package on my doorstep today. Inside were hundreds of maggots, writhing and twisting inside a roadkill hedgehog. A crumpled piece of notebook paper was sitting alongside it, with 2 words written in red pen. Found you.